At my 40th birthday, my wife toasted to her future divorce settlement. Everyone laughed, until I told them I'd already moved every dollar into a trust the day before. The first sign of trouble at my birthday dinner wasn't the champagne, the tiny overpriced desserts, or even the loud crowd of people who believed a good smile could stand in for a real personality. It was her toast. She stood up, glass raised, and smiled at me with the kind of perfection that only practice brings. "To my future divorce settlement," she said. The table roared, not polite chuckles, full-throated, vicious laughter. Her friends cackled like they'd been waiting all night for the punchline. One even shouted, "Get that bag, girl," as though my marriage was a game show prize. I didn't flinch. I didn't even pretend to be hurt. Instead, I laughed. An honest, full laugh. The laugh of a man who had finally reached the end of his own little experiment. I stood, lifted my own glass, and said, "That's hilarious, honey. Funny you should say that. I already transferred everything into my sister's name yesterday. But hey, happy birthday to me." The noise died instantly. The air seemed to thicken. Gone were the smirks and the self-satisfied grins. My wife's glass trembled in her hand. Color drained from her face. It was the quietest, sweetest sound I'd ever heard. The silence of a trap closing. They'd mistaken me for the mark. They never realized I was the one writing the script. Let me be clear, I'm not weak, I'm not clueless, I'm a senior investigator for a major insurance company, working in the Special Investigations Unit. That's the department they call when there's $1 million fraud nobody else can untangle. I don't shuffle papers, I don't wait for tips. I find the lie holding a perfect-looking life together, and then I pull the thread. And for the past year, my own marriage had been my most fascinating case. I met Amelia 4 years ago. She was in the art world, which sounded glamorous but paid almost nothing. Her family looked wealthy from the outside, but, as I would later uncover, were drowning in debt. I was different. I'd built my own success, my own stability. She didn't fall for me because I was her dream. She picked me because I was her parachute. I saw the red flags, how her expectations crept up alongside my promotions, how her needs always matched my bonuses. But after years of dealing with con artists, she felt like a break from the job. I told myself my steadiness might become the foundation for something real, that she'd eventually outgrow the shallow circles she ran in. Our marriage was a calculated risk. I insisted on a prenup protecting my pre-marriage assets. She laughed at it, called it an unromantic, but she signed anyway. For 3 years, I played my role, doting, patient, generous. I paid off her lingering student debt. I bought the house she wanted. I invested, waiting for a return of loyalty that never came. Then, 3 months ago, I noticed something. A single line on a credit card statement. A monthly charge of $500 for a consulting service I'd never heard of. Small enough to hide, but I don't miss patterns. It didn't take long to uncover the truth. The consulting wasn't business advice, it was a high-end divorce coach, a specialist who taught wealthy women how to maximize their settlements. My wife had been paying for lessons in how to gut me financially while still smiling across the dinner table. That was the moment the professional in me took over. The husband clocked out, the investigator clocked in. I didn't confront her. You never alert the subject they're under investigation. You quietly build your case. And last night, at my 40th birthday dinner, at the very performance she'd staged to impress her board of directors, as I like to call them, I closed the file. The silence at that table was the sound of my case going cold. I treated my own marriage the way I treat a fraudulent insurance claim, by launching a full-scale forensic audit. I installed a keylogger on our home computer. A GPS tracker went on the car I'd bought her. And using my professional resources, I dug into her finances, and the finances of her closest friends. What I uncovered wasn't suspicion, it was a conspiracy. Amelia, my wife, had been working with her friends, led by a so-called divorce coach named Claire. Their group chat, which I now had full access to, wasn't gossip. It was a detailed, step-by-step playbook on how to strip me of everything. They listed which assets counted as marital property. They discussed provoking me into an affair so they could trigger the infidelity clause. They even had a countdown to our 4th anniversary, the day Amelia planned to file. The goal was simple: take half the house, secure alimony, and laugh all the way to the bank. My 40th birthday dinner? That wasn't a celebration, it was their victory lap before execution day. But they made one fatal mistake. They thought I was just a boring insurance guy. They didn't realize my entire career is built on exposing people exactly like them. 2 days before the dinner, I made my move. My sister, a partner at one of the best asset protection law firms, spent an entire day with me. We didn't just shuffle assets around, we built an iron fortress. We set up an irrevocable family trust. Every major asset, my premarital investments, savings, and most of my cash was permanently transferred. My sister became the trustee. Then my business formally acquired our house in exchange for shares in a new holding company. That holding company, also owned by the trust. By the end of 8 hours, everything meaningful I owned was legally untouchable. The only things left in both our names? A small checking account with a few $1,000s, and mountains of debt from her lavish spending. So when Amelia stood up at that restaurant and raised her glass with the words, "To my future divorce settlement," I wasn't faking my laugh. That laugh was real, pure. I had just closed the biggest fraud case of my career. The house went up for sale, and once the mortgage was cleared, the leftover equity was to be divided. After subtracting the $65,000 she'd siphoned from me, plus my legal expenses, she'd be left with almost nothing. While she wrestled with that mess, I turned my attention to the real problem, her circle. My payback wasn't about being loud or dramatic. It was about precision, about pulling apart the scaffolding of their smug little world piece by piece. Claire, the so-called divorce coach, was the first domino. She was the strategist behind everything. My digging showed she wasn't just giving advice, she was crossing legal boundaries. She wasn't licensed to practice law, yet she was charging for legal and financial strategies. I built a full dossier, complete with online complaints from past clients, and anonymously forwarded it to the State Bar and the Attorney General's Office for investigation into the unauthorized practice of law. Now her consulting gig is under a major state investigation. Her career is effectively over. The other two friends were easier. Becca, for instance, worked in PR for a squeaky clean, family-friendly company. Yet her social media was a parade of bad decisions. Wild parties, casual drugs, the works. I curated her greatest hits and sent them to her company's HR department with a note. As a shareholder, I am deeply concerned about the public behavior of your employees and the potential risk to your brand's reputation. Within a week, she was gone, fired under the morality clause in her contract. The last friend, Jessica, was married to a partner at a rival insurance firm, a man I actually knew. I asked him out for coffee. I didn't show him the group chat or the screenshots. I just told him man to man that I'd uncovered deeply troubling information during my divorce, specifically that his wife had been actively coaching mine on how to commit marital fraud. Then I handed him the name of an excellent forensic accountant. I don't know what happened afterward, but when I saw him weeks later, his wedding ring was gone. In a single month, Amelia's team collapsed. The women who had laughed at her toast were now unemployed, under investigation, or drowning in their own divorces. They turned on each other, blaming her for dragging a monster into their lives. She was left completely isolated. Final update. 3 months have passed since that birthday dinner. The divorce finalized last week. Just as I predicted, after the house sale and the deductions for the stolen money, Amelia walked away with less than $10,000. A pitiful payout for 3 years of what she believed was a brilliant scheme. She's now back living with her parents. Her father had to take out a second mortgage to cover the legal fallout from both her divorce and a new lawsuit from Uncle Ron against Megan. The whole family is teetering on financial ruin. Their reputation in the community? Shattered. Then came the call I'd been expecting, from a blocked number. She was crying. She said her life was over. She apologized. She admitted she'd been foolish. She begged for my help. I let her finish. Silence hung for a long moment before I answered. "I'm an investigator, Amelia," my voice flat. "My job is to assess risk. You, your family, your friends, you're the riskiest asset I've ever encountered. A normal person might just walk away. I don't. I write off bad investments, and I make sure they're never listed on the market again." I went on. "You thought this was a game. It wasn't. This was a claim. You filed a fraudulent claim against my life, and for the past 3 months I've done my job. I investigated, documented, and denied that claim with extreme prejudice. The difference between you and the other criminals I deal with is that they usually know when they've been caught." Then I hung up, blocked her number. I'm sitting in my new apartment now. Smaller, minimalist, clean, ordered.
The big craftsman house had too many ghosts. My life is quiet now, and completely mine. This wasn't about a single act of revenge. It was a slow, methodical dismantling of a corrupt little system. Amelia and her friends thought they were clever, that they were players, but they were amateurs, trying to run a simple con on a man who unravels cons for a living. They believed they could take everything from me, but the most valuable thing I own isn't money. It's the unshakable certainty that in the end, the books always have to balance, and I'm the one who balances them.